Happy Halloween.
Hopefully we get some other maintainers today because Tiana's done his review on everything we've got out there.
Yes,
You get the golden pumpkin.
I'm so powerful.
It would be nice if GitHub had the option of when a maintainer is the one submitting the thing for a change, if you only need one maintainer rather than two. Because implicitly, you as a submitter, you're a maintainer, you're kind of self-reviewing and saying, this looks good to me.
Yeah. Or the option to enable self-approvals.
Something.
I reached out to Alexi, is that I think Cypher about doing a blog post, but did not hear back. Would there be a next best maintainer? Alexi seemed to be like the most active. Alexa, excuse me.
Yeah.
Very sorry.
How did you reach out?
Slack, but I guess I could try good old fashioned email.
I
Yeah,
feel like a bunch of them live in Git.
I bet he'll respond to email faster than Slack, and yeah, Git faster than email.
Okay, I will. How can you send a just like open a PR? Hi, would you like to
Yeah.
do?
You can't do that, but you might be able to, if they have a pull request or an issue or anything like that as part of the release, you might be able to chime in on there and
Oh yeah. Oh,
let's
that's a
see.
good. Okay, that's a fair point. I could just do like on the release one on the release. I could just say hi.
Was this runtime spec or this was run C, wasn't it?
Run C, yeah. Run C's had the release last week, and we thought, oh, maybe we could do a little bloggy blog.
I wonder if Kier would be interested.
Do they use discussions?
Kalishkin. I'm probably butchering that. Kier Kalishkin is probably a good one to reach out to also.
Okay.
Actually, I know they did have an issue out there because I was getting notifications on it. Let me find that and dig it up.
I can find the other person's maintainers. Okay, I'll just send the
Here we go. I found you one.
you found me one. Okay, cool. Right.
Okay, Hero's in there, Cypher's in there. Yeah, if you chime in on this issue, you might get some attention.
I'll ask then in the issue. Oh, perfect. Okay, great.
4114.
4114. Got it. I will say.
And they were tracking all the blockers for getting their v1.2 out. And so if you said, hey, now that you got this thing released, would anybody like to do a blog post?
Yeah.
And tag Akihiro, Cypher, any of the major maintainers in there. You probably can do add maintainer. There's your Mochi, SC Linux. Thing I'm looking for is, did we define open containers group for that?
Let's see. When I try,
Runtime tools maintainers.
Right.
Now you would be the person that would know if that's the same as the Run C maintainers.
Yeah, I don't think it is. Although maybe should we make a group? Let me go now. Now I'm gonna
You can
go down a
go
rat
into the
hole of like,
security
let's
setting.
go look at the T's. Okay,
You
we
can go pull
have
up their config, their security settings, and see who's
Run
the
C
group
maintainers.
that's.
It's a different group, ever so
Okay.
slightly, ever so slightly. That's fine. That's fine. Run C maintainers.
Because you can
It's-
tag an entire group.
Yes, which I always forget, and then I go, well, that would have been easier.
But you can only do it if you're part of the org. Which is
Did
frustrating.
not know that.
Oh,
Yeah, you can't even see the group if you're not part of the org.
Which means when I was pointing out some of those member things and other things, other places. Curiously, run C maintainers and runtime tool maintainers. They've got some overlap. All right. Well, with Sajay here, I feel like I should say all the actionable agenda items could be done by him.
okay.
No
I have
pressure.
just-
Really?
Yeah, all right, great.
I was looking for a HackMD though.
We need another image spec maintainer because I can't self-review. And Tianon already did his reviews. So if we get one more that wants to go through and put some
This is for pin
LGTMs.
external references? Or all of them?
We've got the remove master reference one. I think you did review, but there's the pin versions that is dependent.
Yeah, the remove master references, I think there's changes requested by Tianon. So
Yeah, but his change is the other PR that is pending a review.
okay, so do you want to reset that or basically
So-
101, right? 1207?
So if you review 1208, Tianon will release his hold on 1207.
Ah,
True.
I see. Okay.
And similar for, well, not similar, but we've got two other ones in there, the hard links and the uname, gname. Those came out of last week's meeting.
Yeah.
So that's part of it.
But thanks for making the 1208, because I mean when we did the releases, this was some inconsistency, right?
We've had inconsistency forever, and so this just finally gives us some consistency.
Okay.
It feels nice that we can actually, when we commit a release and things get turned into HTML docs and PDFs and whatnot, that we bind all our references to what was released at the time. And when you look at that JQ thing, all you have to know is that Tianon has agreed to maintain it for life because I'm not touching it.
Yeah, it was.
That's not even bad, JQ.
No, it's fine.
You want to be triggered, let me go find some recent JQ I've written.
I
That's
assume
like
by
4 lines and most of them are comments.
JQ, do you mean jQuery?
Yes.
JQ. Oh,
No,
yeah?
JQ is a tool for processing JSON.
Ah,
So
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yes.
JQ is the best.
Yeah.
I guess I should have linked you to the homepage, not to the man page that I have on speed dial. Because I write a lot of JQ.
oh, I like their little playground. That's nice.
it is a very nice tool to the point that it's one of the early things I install.
For Brandon, be grateful it's not this. This is even a simplified example. This isn't even like complex JQ, it's just hairy.
Why would you do this to your coworkers?
Because I'm a great person. Why wouldn't you do this to your coworkers?
Because someone has to maintain it after you're not around to maintain it. I mean, at least you commented it, but
Yep, I do
I've
my
got
best.
I've got humorous pictures for code comments that were being shared around last week of things like, we're sorry we're temporarily out of avocados, and it's a display that is above an entire stand full of avocados. It's like, this is code comments in a nutshell. They get stale. All right. While Sajay is deciding who wants to maintain that long,
Yeah, do you want me to
Jake,
run this and actually see this, or I don't know, did you try running this?
I did dry run it. I made sure that it
Okay,
worked.
okay.
I'm sure Tianon did as well. If you do run it, after you're done, you need to reset back and get your repo to a normal state by the end, but not a big deal.
Yeah, feel like I'm held under the gun right now, but I'm gonna. Yeah, I mean, I've run these other things manually already, so it's fine.
There's other commands that we've got listed in the release that
Yeah.
I don't run myself because I think it's VBAT's talking about Vim key bindings, and I don't know that I have the same key bindings he does, and I also do a lot of my stuff in VS Code these days, so we just all make it a little bit differently, and maybe it's time to refresh a couple of those other things. I think it would be nice if it was all just one big make command. Someone just runs a script and just does everything.
Yeah.
Please don't use a make file when what you meant was a shell script.
That too, or even better, a GitHub action it just sees the tag was done and you're not manually checking in PDFs after the fact. That would be another good thing to do.
I wonder if we have any retirees in the OCI that we could suggest should do that.
I've got enough things on my plate right now. I want to go back to here yesterday.
Plate's empty, right?
I want to go back to this scene yesterday. This is a good scene for me yesterday. All right.
Okay. So you're unblocked on the other one, 1207, right?
It's already
if you
merged.
reviewed, you already did.
Yeah.
Look at that. All right. And then the other two there, when you get a chance, those would be good as well.
Yeah, I'll take them in those.
I figure the other good thing, since you're here, Sajay, is that there was an ORAS request to image spec asking how do I do platform-specific OCI artifacts.
Yeah, I asked them to open in this forum because a lot of people have opinions on this. So I think it's more like just get guidance from what folks here think. It's a fun issue to read.
My first knee-jerk thought, I think in the specification, we made a mistake a long time ago by having the platform inside of the config. And unwinding that's going to be a challenge, because my thought process going down that is, what if they disagree with each other? What if we put this information in the manifest and that disagrees with the content inside the config?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there is a reservation in the descriptor. I think it says that it should be used for the manifest only, the actual config. So that's why they were kind of going back and forth. I mean, do others have context on this, or do you want to bring up the PR?
I linked the PR in there. I don't do screen sharing these days because as soon as I do, Zoom doesn't let me stop sharing my screen without crashing.
Okay, I can try.
But yeah, I linked it in there. We're talking 12.16 right now. I even rebooted last week. Twice. Once was because, hey, you haven't rebooted in a long time. Now we see that you're back up. Let's go ahead and install more hardware updates.
Any luck?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. So I think a couple of options were discussed, which is, do we want to do annotations? Or which would seem to be the place where everybody was landing, which is the entire platform struct actually becomes an annotation of that form inside the config object. The reason why this was kind of I think as we discussed to kind of make this first proposal was it avoids, I think tools like Helm already have a config, and changing their config structure might be hard. And this is scoped only for artifacts. So the question was, how do we do this for artifacts? And the other challenge was the descriptor actually has a platform, which I don't think anybody wants to use. But that's also been listed as another way to kind of think about this. But this might complicate it because this is not hoisted in the referers right now. Whereas if you have annotations, it gets exposed in the referers API also. So those were kind of the pros and cons. I think the idea is to just get some engagement and figure out how folks want to go with it. The config blob, I mean, the image config blob is already used by Homebrew and others as a way to kind of hijack this. But that makes it harder to distinguish, because I remember, was it Bjorn who was against using the image config in any form? Because the presence of that type is what they wanted to use as detecting it as an image, right? So, and we've recommended not to use the image config for artifacts. So it kind of gets a little challenging on how we can specify the platform. I think that's the gist of the issue. Any thoughts?
So at least,
see.
at least historically, the config section was for runtime config, right? For runnable things.
So you still have a config descriptor.
Yeah.
We do, but the purpose was that, I would think, right? So, so I don't know if you want to sort of overload that, because then I don't know what path we are going to go if you go down that option.
I don't
Because
see the problem of
in the general
adding
thing,
more data to the descriptor.
yeah, see, I don't know. So the general, at least in the general case, artifacts, there are non-runnable artifacts and things like that, right? So at least my opinion, is to not overload the config more than it already is.
And I feel like one approach is to say, turn into a non-problem and say if it's a multi-platform artifact, then you're going to have an index and all the platforms go in there. That's not a good answer, but I feel like some people would say that. Because the index has the descriptors with the platforms in it. So that's putting the platform in the descriptor, which is exactly what we're talking about doing in the config descriptor, but it's just in a different manifest.
And didn't we have an empty descriptor case for the config the field?
It's a media type, a size, and a body. Doesn't mean you couldn't add more stuff into this. And it's an extra field in the descriptor, but it's a field that is already defined in the descriptor today. It's just defined for a single task, and so we would be deciding, do we have a second task for the same field? But to Sajay's point, one of the big concerns is that this doesn't get pulled up in the reverse API response, and they want to see it there as well. I'm not thrilled about annotations for this use case.
Yeah, I know. I was on the same path. Initially, I was like, okay, let's use the config. But then the points that Ramkumar made also kind of like resonated with me as to should we actually extend on the config? I actually pointed them to, hey, you have a config descriptor and it has a platform already in it that nobody's using. Maybe you could use that. But then they're like, okay, but all the use cases to get the architecture and all that became more harder. And so the other thing I think Terry is another maintainer on Auras from AWS, and what they mentioned was the config media type and the config properties are for the config blob in some way. We have the artifact type as a config entity, and that might be okay. But the platform is the platform of the artifact itself. So updating the config element to indicate the platform of the manifest might be a little out of theme. So that's one of the reasons why he was also suggesting something at the manifest level made more sense rather than putting it into the config, because the the config elements are Helm as its own config, and it's not the platform of the config; it's the platform of the actual artifact. But yeah, it's the lesser of the two bad choices, exactly. So, but I don't know whether annotations is such a big problem because things like variants and all that are all optional. So if it's not there, it's not there. And tools can easily fall back to say, hey, this is the platform and the architecture of the given artifact, and can use that in the reference API to pull the appropriate thing. Anyway, that's all I had, but I just wanted to bring this up though.
So the compatibility working group has been talking about, do we want to extend the platform struct to have another field that would be something like an annotations, a key value field in there that allows us to put more data that runtimes can use to be more granular about their selection of which entry from a manifest list to pick. And so as we start adding more and more, if we think about adding more fields in there, and there's already, I'm counting them up right now, we got 6 fields in there, and we've only proposed 3 of them for this. If we add more options to the platform, now we have an annotation to try to keep in sync with this, and that's where it gets not great in my view. It's not the end of the world, but it's not great, especially if you want to try to serialize something that is not just a string, but is a map or even a slice.
Yeah, that would almost be data at that point, right? Like that's like the data element itself, which is encoded in some way, not an annotation at that point. Yeah, I'm thinking of actually maybe recommending one path to them, which is, I mean, given that it's their own project, or else can use its own annotations for now and maybe go with that, while folks here maybe agree on some path. But it's going to be hard to reconcile in either way. But I'm only hearing one, like only Ram Kumar's opinion right now. So, and it would be good if others had an opinion and they could, I don't know, direct it in some way, so that over the course when people come, it at least gravitates towards some direction. Because multi artifacts are becoming a more and more requirement. So if we have 5 different tools doing it in 5 different ways, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, at least the way I've been doing it right now is I don't put the information in the image manifest in the individual artifact. I put it in the index that is for multiple artifacts collected together.
Is there somewhere that lists out like actual use cases and user use cases for these multi-arch artifacts?
No, that's actually a good question. Let me add a comment on this issue.
Because I think that would help me form an opinion. Because right now I'm like, I could form an opinion in the abstract, but I think it would help to know like what types of artifacts are we talking about? What's the end goal? What are we hoping to get out of it?
At least the direction that I'm leaning is to say put it in the config, but the reason I hesitate is because if we define it for that, I don't think we have a good way of saying this is only for artifacts and not an image. And if someone does it for an image, then you have the potential conflict of this the same day as already in the config blob itself. And so you have to work out how to handle conflicts in that case. If the manifest says it's ARM64 and the image config blob itself says it's AMD64, which is it?
All right, I have taken up enough time.
Thank you, Sajay.
Oh, no, thank you. I think this is everybody's time here. I really appreciate it.
The next on the list here that I think we'll keep kind of short is distribution spec 556. I just want to make sure that I'm not off the mark on this one. But in there, we were talking last week about taking out the last part of the sentence, the verifying the digest from the header of a blob pull. If you're pulling a blob, you're pulling a specific digest. The client knows what digest it wants to pull. And so you're saying the client just verify the digest that it requested. And the submitter of this one is saying they want to keep the longer description. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Thanks, Ajay. So I want to see if I'm off the mark and saying, no, I think we really do want to change this. Because they're saying they want to keep it as is and verify both the client digest and the server responded digest. Is there any way has a value of verifying the digest that comes from the server?
I think in trying to review this, I'm not a distribution spec maintainer, but interested party who's been here a long time. I tried to review this and found it was really easy to get lost in all the spec language when the root of all of this is if you're using some object and it has a digest, you should verify that digest. And if you're ascribing any particular value to a digest, like using it as a lookup key, you should probably validate it too. Basically, if you provide the digest, you already know what you expect the content to be, so you should validate that. If you then also store the digest that the registry gives you back and it's different than the one you gave, you should probably validate that too. If you don't store it, then it doesn't matter.
So if I'm pulling a blob, for me to pull a blob, I have to have received that digest from more than likely a manifest.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if I'm just trying to make sure the DAG is consistent and valid and everything else, the only digest I care about is the digest that came out of the manifest descriptor. I don't care about the digest that the registry gives me.
Yep. And you have no reason to even store the digest the registry gives you.
And in this case, what they're saying is that they want the string to read the client should verify both. And so the direction I'm saying is, I don't think there are any cases in there where both should be verified. And I hear you trying to walk a fine line, so I'm trying to figure out where your fine line is you're walking.
Yeah, the case I'm thinking of is maybe easier to understand on a tag lookup. I ask the registry for the latest tag, and it gives me back a digest. And of course, it's in my best interest to store that digest as a client for lookup and for deduplication. But I should also verify that digest before I store it to make sure that the content they gave me actually matches the digest they claim it was.
So that is going up to the previous section. We've got two different APIs for manifest versus blob.
Right.
And the manifest does say that clients, if they choose to process that header, should verify that header. And so that applies to the manifest. The one that we're having the challenge with right now is just the blobs.
Yeah, I don't see a reason for a client to store the registry provided blob. But if, say, someone comes up with a use case for doing so, they should verify the digest before storing it and leaning on it. Like if you're leaning on data that can be verified, you should verify it before you lean on it. You don't go walk on a bridge without verifying that it's probably going to hold your weight, right?
But you
Or at
would have
least you
already,
should.
how would you have gotten the digest of the blob to pull in the scenario you're thinking of?
I'm thinking of a scenario like, say, I'll pick on Docker Hub and throw out a totally unrealistic scenario that will probably never happen. Imagine Docker Hub decided that Blake 3 was the end all be all and adjusted all of the backends on Docker Hub to prefer Blake 3, and SHA-256 was then a conversion layer for Blake 3 instead underneath. So all of the manifests still reference SHA-256. All the users are still requesting blobs via SHA-256, but it would not be unreasonable for the registry to respond with a header with that, to the registry, canonical Blake 3 digest in it. If, I can't think of a use case, but if a client came up with a use case for trusting that registry header and storing it in some way, maybe so that just in case they see this blob somewhere else, they already know this blob has another name, they should verify it before they trust it. Like, because the way this works on Docker Hub, I don't think this is a secret because I think this is from distribution, is that other digests are like a proxy for the canonical digest, right? So there is a canonical digest algorithm on Docker Hub, which is a reasonable implementation, and other digests are then essentially symlinks or aliases of that canonical digest for the storage backend.
So
it would be reasonable to implement the client-side storage the same way because, again, the client-side storage looks a lot like registry storage, right? They have the same data model. They're representing the same data. It makes sense to store it the same way. Deduping in that way client-side also makes sense. If the server gives you back a digest that doesn't match the one you requested, if it's reasonable for you to validate that digest, you can store that as an additional alias for this blob so that if you see that alias elsewhere, you know you already have the blob.
So let me propose this, because I feel like there's a in-between point here that we can all agree at. When we look at the manifest, we separate in there that, hey, there is this header and clients could ignore this value, but if they decide to use it, they must verify it matches the actual content. So that's line 182 that we did. What if we modified line 196 be similar for the blobs, which is saying, hey, you can have this header, and to say, if this header is present and the clients decide to use it, decide to store it, like you're saying, they should verify it and separate that from the part that says clients should be verifying the body matches what they requested.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that keep everybody happy, I'm hoping.
Yeah, I don't know.
If we basically separate those two concepts of, hey, we can't have this header there. If that header is there and you're using it, go ahead and do this thing.
Yeah.
But otherwise, the thing you're really supposed to be doing is making sure that what you asked for is what you got.
Yeah.
All right. I think we can find this in-between place. I can work on a response with that. So I'll follow up on that PR. I like one word answers. Yeah, that's good. Who was the one asking about CDN stuff? That seems like a very Sage thing to ask about.
No, that was me.
Oh, okay. Go ahead and jump in on this
Yeah.
one, Rob. What do we got?
Yeah. So this is a request that is coming from one of the users of SORT actually. So they filed an issue against SORT saying clients push blobs into SORT, and when they want the blobs out, can somehow figure out a way that SORT is able to redirect it to some other CDN, like an S3, a pre-signed URL from S3 somewhere. So that is, and I pointed to this issue because this issue predates this request, right? So, so the idea is now that you push a blob and somehow the registry has whatever backend is able to make a copy of this somewhere else and then and create that URL, and when it responds back, it's able to point you directly to that URL. So that I think is the overall scheme of things. So the question is there interest to tackle those kinds of issues or not in this forum?
It's been a long time. I'm going to channel my inner John, which is that we shouldn't redefine the specification when there's already an HTTP specification out there. And so like we go through and specify a whole bunch of this stuff for pagination and other kinds of things. In this case, I feel like there should just be a section at the top of the distribution spec that says we're following the HTTP spec, and that includes support for all of these different things, and just list out a bunch of stuff and include 307 status in there. And it wouldn't be specific to any blob request or anything like that. It's just putting it right out there. We're just a implementation that sits on top of the HTTP spec, and we delegate everything to them.
Okay, let's see if we can write that story.
Does that sound reasonable? And I think this has come up a few times before, and that's what John was saying. I very much agree with it, which is that if we can avoid rewriting anything on our side and getting too granular, it makes us a lot more flexible. And it makes us a lot more consistent. The reason this just works today is because most people are using the Go client, and the Go client just implements this for you. You're not writing any code in Go because it's just depending on the HTTP spec.
Okay. Yeah, so just to see how this would work in the real world, right? So so let's say that the client is trying to pull a blob from somewhere, and then what you're saying is just somehow figure out a way to generate a redirect for that URL to something else.
The direction I'm going is that there will be nothing that we have to figure out on the distribution spec side. We just say that distribution spec is implemented using the HTTP spec, and that includes support for things like HTTP 307 redirect status. And your client should know how to handle that, just like any other HTTP client knows how to handle it.
No, I'm thinking, so that's from the client side, I understand that part. So I'm thinking more from the registry side. So if I were a registry operator, how would I pull this off? So the reason is this pain point is coming mainly from the registry side, because we don't want our registry to be a hotspot or whatever the case may be, right? Latency, whatever, right? So so if I am a registry operator, how would I pull this off? That's what I'm thinking.
So what are the challenges you're facing in getting the redirect on your side?
Nothing. I mean, I haven't attempted this. So what it would look like to me is if I am the registry and I get these blobs and I want them situated somewhere else to redirect to, so I have to take on that effort. I have to copy it somewhere, then do a redirect for that and all of that stuff, all that machinery. And of course, yeah, maybe there is nothing to be done on the spec side for this particular use case.
I feel like part of the spec defines with the blob upload a way to point you over to a different location. You get a location header back and it can point you to a different server. I feel like all of that was intentionally designed for supporting things like this, where your blob storage is somewhere that's going to handle a whole lot of data that is separate from the registry server. And this was just kind of built-in functionality.
Yeah, for a lot of registries, the registry part of blob upload is just handing off auth tokens or whatever for a URL that the client can upload directly to in whatever storage, S3 or whatever. I think distribution even has like a config option for exposing that directly instead of proxying the data. Go see if I'm remembering that incorrectly.
I know the APIs are there. I know it's got support for backing on S3 and other kinds of backends in there. I just don't know how they implement that upload, whether it goes directly to a CDN or whether it goes directly to S3, which then talks to CDN.
I know for like Docker Hub, even blob polls will directly give you an exposed like Cloudflare R2 or S3 URL directly on the blob poll, so that you're not even proxying through Docker Hub at all at that point. You're just getting it straight off S3.
Which is all the more reason we don't trust the registry headers. We just take what the manifest descriptor says.
That topic is closed, Brandon.
I know when this came up before, one of the comments that Sajay had was thinking about authentication, the concept of a redirect, because you don't want to pass through your authentication credentials and whatnot to a third-party server that you haven't logged into. It has caused me some challenges because I needed to go through and rewrite a bunch of code because someone put a redirect pointing to Docker Hub, not Docker Hub pointing a redirect to their different things, but someone made their own front end, which was just a straight redirect Docker Hub. And so I would log into their registry, which is really Docker Hub, but I never passed the authentication token to Docker Hub because that was a redirect. Which meant that I needed to track as a client when I'm going through redirects to only pass the authentication tokens to the servers in that redirect chain that I'd previously logged into and no one else.
Yeah, authentication is the really interesting complexity with redirects. Which is why all the location headers from Docker Hub return URLs that include embedded tokens that are time limited and scope limited.
I'm imagining all of that is done as like arguments in the URL for everybody, and they're working all kinds of insanity on the back end to make that happen.
Yeah.
Did we give you enough direction there? I feel like we're just kind of talking around on this one.
No, this is good. This is actually a good discussion. I think I agree actually. But let's see. I'll suggest it to the person who filed the issue. Let's see what they say. They may come back with saying that, no, we tried this and this is how it broke or things like that. So we'll see. Yeah, about the sorry to this sidetracking here, right? So about the issue about digest validation, the language in the spec only concerns itself with validation from the client point of view, but there is no language. I actually looked it up and said that there doesn't seem to be a language where it says that I push something and I basically say manifest, seal the manifest with this digest, then the registry has to validate that content. There is no language in the spec as far as I can tell.
I would say that it would be good if registries did validate. And I would want to go through and double check on the push to see if there's anything in there when clients specify a digest, because that would be nice if they did. But from an overall security perspective, I don't think it's required, because whoever pushed that initial manifest pushed it as part of their whole DAG. If a digest doesn't match, you just get a broken image and the client pulling it just rejects it.
Assuming there is at least one verification step somewhere.
Which is the client receiving. I mean, the security model very much assumes that the registry doesn't have to be trusted if you have the digest of the manifest. If you're trying to get the digest of the manifest, then all bets are off. You're trusting the registry at that point. But once you have that digest, there is no trust needed of the registry to verify anything or that the registry didn't modify something. That trust is implicit in the DAG structure.
Okay. Yeah, but again, do we want to sort of make that a should language at all is the question, at least from the registry side.
It wouldn't be in this part that we're writing in 556. It wouldn't
Yeah,
be in the
this
lines
will
of
be
change in there. It
yeah,
would
this
be
will
a
a new
different
thing.
section for the push code, which would be nice to say registries may verify digest of push content. It would be a nice thing if they can do.
Okay.
Pretty sure most everybody does that already, so I don't think you'll see any conflict on that. The biggest conflict is it may or is it should? Anything else people want to chat about today? Got a few minutes. We actually had one extra person submitting stuff for me. Going once, going twice. Okay. Give you back 15. We're down to only 10 minutes left now. Give you back 10 minutes. Enjoy the rest of your week. Happy Halloween to everybody. Make sure the kids stay safe out there. This is kids get hit by cars today more than any other day of the year, so be safe out there.
Yeah, take care all.
All right. Cheers, all.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Yeah.
You, Brandon. I hope your neighbors give you lots of candy.
I'm trying to get rid of all mine.
Leave it in a bowl. They'll take it all.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.